Hello everyone, and welcome to the DM planning session for Ashes of Autumn, which was a 5e one-shot that I actually ran last night. I didn't know if I was going to be recording this today or if the session was going to end up being a two-shot, so I am doing this as a bit of a retrospective. This session was a lot of fun. It was a one-shot, as I said, and obviously there's a big spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Ashes of Autumn yet, check that out. This will probably be a fairly short video. I just wanted to go through how I planned this and what I planned going into the session, because how I planned this one shot is a lot different than how I planned like a fragment session, you know, a serialized campaign. So I'm gonna go through my plans for this, but first off, you should know that hi, I'm Jacob. I don't know if I said that. This is Starlight Company. Welcome. Sorry if there's some glare from my window behind me. Sorry. So this was taking place in our Starlight Company world that we are making together. We hope to have like a source book at some point. We want to really go hard and make a really cool world. And this was the first real foray into that, where I was just kind of making stuff up as I went along and making it canon. So that was fun. This was a little teaser into what we are doing. And with this world, it's important to know that we are going between a cross of high fantasy and dark fantasy, which means magic is everywhere. Magic is relatively well understood, but there's also a lot of darkness in the world, and it can be grim sometimes. So I wanted to really play with those themes a lot, and themes of, you know, like light in the darkness, where there's always an element of happiness or reprieve to be found even in the darkest of times. Brings to mind an Albus Dumbledore quote, but regardless, yeah, I'll go through what I planned. I had to redo my plans a few times for this session. It was slightly terrifying because I was replanning things, like big things, I don't know, an hour before the session started, and I was making tokens as the session was going on, so that was a little rough. I think I could have managed my time better, but also it was hard for me approaching this because I didn't exactly we hadn't made much. I was just making a town, making characters from scratch and going with it, and so I had to really think on the fly a lot, which was fun. It was a great test of my improv skills, but also I didn't want to misstep, you know, make something be real and then have to redact that later on. You know, I wanted everything that I said to be okay as canon for this world, so I try to keep everything kind of low scale, kind of constrained to what is being shown. So yes, that let's go into my notes. So I wrote an introduction, which you can see here. It's I don't know why the spacing is all messed up, but yeah, so I wrote this. You're welcome to read it. I wanted a way to introduce the players and give them a a purpose in where they were starting, to give them some amount of background into why they are where they are, what's going on with the world, and how they would be feeling as those characters. And I also wanted to write something out to do a good intro for the VOD, for the stream, so that, you know, viewers would have a good idea of what was going on and be able to really put themselves in that place and feel what was going on. So essentially, it was a festival is starting, winter has begun, the Ashes of Autumn, from the Ashes of Autumn grow the seeds of winter. That was the big thing going into this session. So yeah, great fun. I really liked writing that. I didn't plan it at all. I just started writing and I made it real. So yeah, and then I went into the outline. I wrote what I needed to have, and then you'll find over here, you'll see just kind of a lot of random notes that I took. I wrote what I needed and took away things from there as I did. But anyway, to the introduction, I described the village. I just made a village and started going with some ideas with that. The festival, I knew there would be food and games there, and there would be a show that the orphans arranged. My early ideas was for only the orphans to be taken by the drow, by the shadows. But I realized that the characters wouldn't inherently have a stake in that, right? Everything that I do as a DM always comes back to the characters, and if the characters don't have a reason to partake in it, there's no reason for them to do it, right? Yeah, they could do it for the good, right? But that's not exactly how the themes of this world work. That's not how people in the real world work out, right? I mean, yes, people do have good in them. They want to do good and see good things happen in the world, but it's not always a guarantee, and that's not always enough for these characters who might have seen worse times or been beaten down by the weather and all that stuff. So I decided that they would all be attacked. They did not all sleep outside. So if you've seen the session, you'll know. So I do recommend that you watch the session so that you have context for what I'm talking about, because I don't want to spend 30 minutes explaining what happened in the session. But I planned that there would be this hearth flame, which is this token of this deity of Avendir, the Flame Keeper. So deities were all mortals that ascended. No traditional deities exist in this world, except for Lolth, but it's a little different. So there's that, and they would be protected by some deity, but in any case, the shadows attack, take people down to the Underdark, into the city known as Ultar, which is where Drow used to live, but it's been since abandoned, and the crane that was used to transport people to and from, or between Ultar and Vandergost, was not in disrepair, but it was kind of shut down because they didn't want to have communication with the Underdark anymore. And I just wanted to have a lot of ideas out there, not necessarily explained, but to just have them out there to set the scene for the world. I think there's something to be said. Yeah, there's the whole thing about show versus tell, right? But also more than that, I just wanted to give the characters the information that they would know, right? Give the players the information that the characters would know, what the NPCs would know. This is something that happened a long time ago, and all they would see is the remnants of what happened. I don't have to explain what happened, because that goes, you can write lore, you can know lore, but the point that you are just spitting lore at your players just so that they know things that the characters might not even know, then it just becomes an encyclopedia and is less fun to play in, right? If you limit the knowledge of the players to the knowledge of the characters, then the stakes of the world are so much more heightened. And that's so important to me, to keep, immersion. Yeah, my players are great. They don't metagame, at least not a lot. And, even if they did, they can still know things about the world. But there's something to be said about not knowing what to expect, right? That's why good mysteries and good horror movies, stories have such an impact, because you don't know what to expect. You don't know the reality of a monster or of a place, and that is what gives those stories such a hit, right? If you don't go for simple jump scares, if you go for things that are slow and methodical, exploration of the unknown, it can be really freaky, and I wanted to play with those horror elements a little bit. So anyway, people were taken. I was not expecting a second chance to be taken. I was expecting there to be a fight with the shadows in the center of town. I prepared a map for that, and there would be a fight, and then would see a lot of people taken, but be able to save a few. That didn't happen. Everyone got taken except for Burke, who was one of the orphans, and the Miss Madeline, I think that was her name, the orphanage owner. So all of that, or madam. Everyone else got taken. Second chance was also taken. I wasn't expecting that, but I got to play into what they were seeing of the group, so I got to add some, I don't necessarily want to say humanizing elements, because the drow there that took them were very surreal. They were dealing with things that weren't explained, and I didn't want to really humanize them too much, because this is just a one-shot. Of course, there are human elements to them that I went into, that I planned, but I did not want to dig too deep into them. I didn't want to over-explain things. I wanted it to be realistic, the conversations that they were having, that the drow were having. What they did was just what they would do, not what they would do in a story where they're trying to explain all their stuff, right? No monologuing, just acting as they do because of their circumstances, because that's how people act, right? They only act with what they know. So that was an Ultar, and then Second Chance ended up going down the tunnels with the group, and she ended up escaping, which was cool. This was also our first session where we had a guest, so that was fun. We had Liz. So check out the VOD. It's super fun. And if the VOD isn't up yet when you're watching this, maybe hold off on this video until the VOD. So anyway, then the two men and Elrin went down the lift, and they just saw darkness. And in this world, the Underdark is the darkness is magical in that it's just pervasive. We've planned a lot, and I wanted to really play with some Underdark stuff. I'm really putting a lot of time into fleshing out the Underdark, and I wanted to show a little bit of what I'd planned and what Austin and I had talked about with relation to that. So I also wanted there to be a little bit of a reprieve in the darkness. As I said, I wanted there to be some happiness to be found. So they found a Wraith Green Whisperer who was a druid. This is someone who they could have asked to help them, but they ended up just leaving him, which was totally fine. It was completely optional. I just wanted there to be that option, right? I think in a good one-shot, there are plenty of options, plenty of different avenues that you can go down. As players, you know, it's not so much, yes, time is more limited than in a serialized campaign like Fragments, so you do kind of want to push them in a good direction, right? The direction that you've planned, because otherwise things can get off the beaten path, and then you end up spending a lot of time doing things that you're not expecting, which in a one-shot is potentially a detriment to the story. But in this, I wanted to give the opportunity to both learn about the plot, because Wraith has been there in those tunnels for a very long time, living amongst his garden, and I wanted to give just an element of also curiosity to the world. You know, why is this gnome there? Who knows? They didn't delve into that, and that's totally fine. I didn't want to beat them over the head with what I'd planned. I just wanted that to be there, and it was something they could have done, and they didn't, and it was totally fine, which I love. I think leaving that mystery in the world is excellent. So I don't even want to go into what I planned for Wraith, but Wraith could have been a potential ally in the fight. They ended up not needing Wraith anyway, so that's fine. So anyway, the other path was going towards the Barrows. So I wanted a Barrows segment. I wanted some sort of puzzle in a one-shot. I really like puzzles in campaigns, and I don't get a lot of opportunities to put deep puzzles in, because ostensibly that's an hour of a 3 to 4 hour session that you are spending not giving the players much, right? They are just going solely on what they know. So I wanted this one shot to have an element of a puzzle, because me as a player, I love playing puzzles, and I don't get to very often. And I know that some of my players like Austin and Adrian and Ronan really do enjoy puzzles. So I wanted to put one in there, and I like making them. Usually I don't look them up. So I started writing one. I wrote a long poem that had an interesting rhyme scheme. It was very atypical, which I liked. Essentially, there were 7 Dooranda siblings over the course of a few hundred years. They were in order of when they were born, like earliest to least, and then they each had a little urn with a flame on it that burned a different color, and they were all mismatched, so they had to place the correct urns with the correct headstones. So the inscription is, this is Foundry I was messing with. It said this. I wrote this, you can read it if you'd like. It was basically a cryptic way of telling them that they should change the urn order, and they did. They tried a lot of things, and it was really cool. As a DM, I like giving them this kind of thing, letting them talk it over, and dealing with that kind of stuff, you know, puzzling through it, because I do have very intelligent players, and it's fun watching that. And it's also, to me, it's important for a puzzle to not require real world knowledge, right? To give them all the tools in the campaign, in the session, to solve the puzzle. Whether or not they get it is up to them, right? And you can also give them clues if they ask for it. You can make them do rolls like intelligence checks or investigation checks to find a little clue. You can give them certain things to help them figure out the puzzle. I did not have to in this case, but you know, that's opposed to it, you know, making players feel stupid for not knowing a real world cipher or something like that, right? For not having real world knowledge. You know, you can make a cipher. I think that's a great idea, and that's probably something that I'll put in a game in the future. But you know, requiring only in-game knowledge is important. So anyway, not that real world knowledge couldn't help inform their decisions, right? But yeah, that's a whole nother thing, and I want to do a video about puzzles at some point. But so I planned the town, that was all of that. Then they did this puzzle. I also wanted there to be a circular dial. There was going to be a fight if they messed up the order of the urns, but they didn't mess up the order, so it was fine. And they passed through relatively easily once they figured out how it worked. I planned light leechers. They are these creatures that are eldritch horror creatures turned from children or other people, and that was the original plan, was to make it be about the light leechers, be about a pale king of the light leechers, and they were turning the children of the orphanage into these creatures. But I decided I wanted it to be more drow centric because of some things that we were planning relating to the two sons, which I'm not going to go into here because that's some lore that we haven't totally fleshed out yet. Wow, I've been talking at the speed of light this whole time. So the barrows, yeah, there's a door on the side with this emblem. They could have tried some things, they didn't, which is totally fine. My idea was just to have that be there, to not be a big time sink, just to be there as you know, a little clue that there's more going on than just what's going on. And I won't say what I'd planned for that either. More caves. I planned a fight, but I was just gonna feel out how the time was going. I wasn't sure how long the puzzle would take, how long all the other stuff would take in the very beginning of the session, so I just wanted to, I had a few different maps and enemies ready in case there needed to be a fight. But honestly, I think the session flowed very well. There was a broad variety of things that posed challenges and solutions that they came up with. So they ended up using a lot of their skills, a lot of their talents, and yeah. I also did plan a trap, but I ended up using a different trap that I improvised. So they would have some damage, so that they would realize that this darkness does pose a threat if they're not used to it. And then before this fight, I had... Oh, no, that was it. So after the barrows, they descended into the Star Render chamber, and the Star Render was basically this opportunity for a drow individual to ascend to near godhood, right, or begin that ascension. And it has to do with how the Legends of the Drow work in this world that we're still working on fleshing out, but I had some cool ideas and I wanted to hint at them, right? The point of this session was just to hint that this world is massive, that there are things working in the deep, and if this was the only session dealing with the Underdark, I wanted at least this brief look into what was happening in the Underdark, right? And it can be totally removed from what else happens in our future campaigns in this world, or maybe it is related. So yeah, let's see, there were a few mechanics to this fight, right? The Star Render was going to gain HP for the people that were sacrificed, and if all were sacrificed, then the Star Render would be super powerful and escape or kill them. You know, with a one-shot, especially in this world, and I know my players very well, I would not recommend going into a one-shot or any kind of session with the intention of killing your characters. I think that's kind of messed up, and it doesn't promote a lot of trust between your players and yourself. But I know my players very well, and I know that if I pose that kind of danger in a realistic way, that they would accept that kind of outcome, and it ended up working really well, right? It was dire the whole time. It was dark. They felt that theme of oppressive darkness and the stakes that were there. They saw villagers being turned into these light leechers, and they had to kill them, right? So they had a fight with light leechers earlier in the tunnels, and to later find out that they were villagers that they were killing is messed up, and it's this element of the world that I don't know if they were expecting. They alluded to having an idea just because they know me very well that I would come up with something that messed up, but there are stakes, right? Then knowing that time is a big concern. If they waste time, they are losing villagers, and that's the reason they're down there, right? So yeah, it ended up going well. That fight went fairly well. I made a stat block, and this fight that you saw in the VOD or the stream, it went way differently than I was expecting. The star render was very strong, but the way that they fought and really teamed up, I think I didn't balance things well enough for it to be an extremely long boss fight, which was fine. I think it being a shorter boss fight is fine. I think in D&D, a lot of DMs worry about making every fight extremely balanced, but that's slightly unrealistic. And by slightly, I mean extremely unrealistic. In the world, you're gonna fight a whole range of, or deal with a whole range of issues, with a whole range of difficulties. Not everyone is going to pose a legitimate threat, and even though this was happening, even though this is big stakes, maybe the stakes don't necessarily line up with their strength, and it turned out that was the case. So that was a cool way of showing imbalances of power as well, and that's a big theme in this world. And also just that you don't have to be extremely strong and talented to be posing a threat in this world, maybe. So big themes. It was a fun fight, and they ended up beating the star render before they ascended or even pulled off any of their cool attacks. I thought about giving them legendary actions, but there was enough going on with the battle and enough people turning into light leechers that it would have been too much, and it would have dragged out the fight. This was basically 3 fights in. This was like 3 fights into the one shot, and I did not want them to. I didn't want it to be a certain death, right? They'd already passed a lot of challenges, and the session wasn't over. So after this fight, the only villager that they saved was Juniper, the child of the 2 young half-elves, and the lava started to rise. I wanted there to be some element of danger leaving. I wanted them to have to be hasty leaving, and I actually did not plan a skill challenge, but I really liked how it played out. That was, I think, my most successful skill challenge as a DM, and it went well. So if you're not sure what skill challenges are, look it up. It was a lot of fun. They basically got to use their skills and spells, whatever they had tapped, and it showed this unending desperation to escape, right? The Underdark is hostile, all of it. Yes, of course, there are these places of reprieve, but also at the same time, delving in always poses a danger. No matter what, it's mysterious and unknown, and to these people who aren't from the Underdark, Afi was kind of spent a lot of time in the Underdark, but this is still alien to them, and they weren't expecting the lava flow to increase. And in the end, big spoiler alert, Tomor died and gave up his falcon Akula to Juniper, and I really love that. And that's when we ended the session with the 3 remaining party members and Akula and Juniper ascending back to Vandragost, having escaped. I think that was an elegant way to end the session. It was really cool and meaningful, and this one shot, if it is anything for this world, it will provide a living myth. People will be able to say, have you heard of the tragedy of Vandragost? Or did you hear what happened? Or perhaps in a session in the future, in a campaign, they'll find an adult half-elven woman with a falcon who will tell stories of her parents that were killed by drow in the Underdark, and have that. Or maybe it'll be a player character. And it also, to the viewers and the players and myself, provides a look into this world with stakes to set the tone. I think, this session wasn't perfect. I could have done a lot more with the combats to make them more harrowing, to make them more difficult, to make them more immersive. I could have written a lot more, planned a lot more, or improvised more, on the other hand. But I had a lot of fun, and I think in the end of the day, in retrospect, I accomplished everything I wanted to with that session. It was an introduction to the world. It was impactful and deep, and the players had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. So that's kind of what I planned. This is when they were working on the puzzle. There was a cave fight here against some light leechers. I had planned a Vandragost battle here in town around the Hearth Flame and Ultar. I had a map here that they were going to have to fight in if they made it down there quickly, but they didn't. And I also planned a lot of monsters. There were Durgar that could have potentially come, a bunch of monsters, Palekin companions, player characters, and yeah, so I hope the planning video was interesting to you. I also got some good ambiance for snowing and the Underdark and music that was fitting for it. I think that's also important to set the mood. Yeah, that was my planning for Ashes of Autumn. Great session. I'm so excited to keep working on this world, and I hope you had a lot of fun with it. So that's all. Again, I am Jacob. This is the Starlight Company, and have a wonderful Telltale day. Bye.